Good evening, folks, and welcome to Ridgecrest Talk. I'm Al Huey, along with my partner, Robert Eierman, and our special guest, once again, Mr. Don Zdeba from the Water District. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Don.
Good to be here. Thank you.
It's my understanding that the water restrictions that the state had imposed are vanished. Is that true?
In a sense, yes, and we've been getting calls from people that think that the drought is over because of the news that came out. But actually, what happened was on April 20th, there was a public meeting in Sacramento, which was to allow public comment on what to do going forward with restrictions for the drought. The Association of California Water Agencies, ACWA, was very active in lobbying for some changes to the mandatory restrictions that have been assigned, the tier structure, the 4% to 36%. The State Water Resources Control Board staff considered the public comment, the comments from ACWA, and brought a recommendation to the State Board on May 18th that would do away with the tiered system and allow local water agencies to establish their own targets, given some guidelines of a formula to follow and such. And that was approved. So water wholesalers have been given till June 15th to submit their targets, and water agencies such as Indian Wells Valley Water District have until June 22nd to submit their targets. And you were going to ask a question. I could go into how it's going to be determined.
Can you elaborate a little bit on the formula?
Sure. That's what I was going to do. The formula is such that they want you to look at your 2013 and 14 total water production within the basin, and then take the average of those 2 years, and then to look at your water supply, whether it's groundwater, surface water, imported water, any combination of those, determine your total supply, and then assume 3 more years of drought, and then determine, based on that, do you have enough water to meet your demand for the 3 years based on your usage, the average usage in 2013 and 14.
Well, that poses an interesting question for me anyway. When you say look at your water supply, you're talking about what's in the tanks?
Yeah, no, not in the tanks, what's in the aquifer. And I can tell you how the approach that we're taking, or I'm suggesting we take.
Because I didn't think anybody could say accurately how much water was down there.
That's been a topic of debate for
the only
decades.
The only study that was done that really quantified how much water was in the basin was the 1993 Bureau of Reclamation study. And it went so far as to calculate if you dewatered the aquifer 300 feet, here's how much water you have. Of course, there's more water than below 300 feet. So the best calculation that we can do, and to give you an idea of the approach we're taking, is to use that Bureau of Rec report. If you dewater the first 300 feet, based on that report in 1993, there was 3,020,000 acre feet of water. Okay, so the best approach we can take is the Cooperative Groundwater Management Group every year has reported water production. The major producers, some of it has had to be estimated, such as the de minimis users, the private wells. But you've probably seen the spreadsheet. You gentlemen have been kind of looking into water the last couple of years, but you may have seen that spreadsheet that goes back to 1975 and shows production within the basin. So going back to 1993 and using that report through 2015, add up all those years and subtract that from the 3,020,000 acre feet that were calculated in the top 300 feet. That production since 1993 amounted to, I believe, something like 540,000 acre feet. So roughly leaves you with 250,000 acre feet of water.
Whoa, wait, I missed something there. We had, in the millions.
Oh, I'm sorry, 2,500,000.
Yes.
Did I say 250,000?
Yes.
I'm sorry. 2,500,000 acre feet of water remaining in that top 300 feet.
With a usage of 500,000 per year. Is that what you said?
No, the usage would be, if we go back and look at that chart that the water group has maintained, the average for the last 10 years has been just under 29,000 acre feet.
Okay.
So going back to the formula that they're using, if we look at that average as being accurate, it may be off a little bit, but 29,000 acre feet in the whole context of millions of acre feet isn't much. So If we assume 29,000 acre-feet of pumping the next 3 years, we have more than enough water based on that 2,500,000 still in that top.
No kidding.
Right.
Yes, I mean, that's a huge amount.
So if we calculate, if we go through, and I've done this already, I was on a conference call Monday with the state board in which they were outlining the procedure for doing your calculation. If we go through the steps and we make those assumptions that I just outlined, we end up with a conservation rate of 0. And as you well know, I'm sure you would understand, when you're a medium priority basin classified as in critical overdraft and you turn in a 0% conservation rate, that's not going to fly very well.
Well, okay, and I agree with what you're saying, but isn't the way to debate that to say, although liars figure, these figures tell us what we need to do, and using your formula, we come up with a 0 conservation rate. What's wrong with that? We're not fabricating anything. We're not exaggerating anything. We're using your formula. So what's the problem?
The problem would be that we continue to see water well levels decline. And so you don't...
Okay, but now we're going to get into the shot glass versus the swimming pool debate.
We're trying to get into that sustainable condition. And sustainable meaning that you're in balance, and we're not in balance. So,
but if we used 3 drops of water, we wouldn't be in balance, because according to many experts, we don't get any recharge that we see in the immediate future. It's hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of years after that water runs down from those mountains that we see it in our aquifer.
Well, again, that's a...
I'm just saying what people have said, Dr. Decker being one of them.
But the annual recharge is estimated to be 7,000 to 11,000 acre-feet. Annual recharge.
I understand.
We are getting some recharge into the basin.
And that estimate was done on how? Did they use the isotopes or whatever that they...
There's been several studies that have been done.
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Answer that question when we get back.
Yeah, we ran up against that break.
Got to take another break, or a break. We'll be back. Join us here on Ridgecrest Talk.
And welcome back to segment 2 of the Thursday night edition of Ridgecrest Talk. And this evening, we're privileged again to have Mr. Don Zdeba, the general manager of the Indian Wells Valley Water District. And we were talking, I understand that...
The recharge rate.
Yes, I understand that we're talking about the recharge rate. But my point was, according to some people, we might be seeing a rate each year, but it's where that water started out being on the surface. And so my point with that is if it is a good number of years before the water starts on the surface and reaches the aquifer, agreed, we're still getting the same recharge, 7 to 11,000. But that came from hundreds or thousands of years ago. So the fact that we have a drought today and there's no water running down, we won't see any change in that recharge.
Well, conceptually, what you have to look at is there's constant recharge into the basin. But I think what you're saying, the water that's falling now in the Sierra, by the time it actually, that water gets into the basin.
Our grandkids will be dead.
There is a continuous flow, granted it's slow.
So no matter what we do right now, and the fact that we're in a drought now has no impact on our recharge rate. It will have an impact on the recharge rate hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, sometime in the future, but it doesn't have any impact today.
To your point, if there's no precipitation falling on the Sierra in the last 5 years, there's nothing to recharge. So,
but we won't see that for a long, long time.
Likely so.
Okay, that was my point.
Okay.
And we know that California went through 500 years of drought from about 800 to 1300 AD. And California's, if you listen to the experts, which I'm not one, I'm just repeating, they say that in between that, there was like 400 and some years of drought, and then 50 years of lots and lots and lots of rain, and then back into another drought.
Well, there's no question it's climate cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
There are wet periods and dry periods.
So all I was saying is, and I understand that we have government requirements, and I'm not arguing with your requirement to follow those.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just arguing relative to the sanity of those government requirements. That's all.
Understood. Now, the cyclical nature of the climate is evidenced by Cyril's Lake, because you've got interbedded salts and muds over there. The muds would be times when you've got more flow going into the lake, and then the salts when the lake would recede, and that would have evaporation. So we know that climate has changed. It's over time.
Okay, getting back to the state lifting the
Right.
the
We came up with a
restrictions.
zero conservation rate
By calculation.
based on their formula. Right. But your feeling is that they're not going to accept that.
It's more than a feeling. I think it's a knowledge. Based on the conversation on Monday,
Okay.
because that question came up. People ask, if we get a zero conservation rate, will that be accepted? And based on the fact that we're looking at having drought extend for another few years, the feeling, and I would agree, it's irresponsible to go back to what we were doing before and just say, okay, all restrictions are off, use as much water as you want. Especially, as I said, when we're working to develop a groundwater sustainability agency to bring the basin to a sustainable condition. So the recommendation,
My opinion, an impossible task.
Well,
you're never going to get there.
it's going to take some different thinking, I think.
Well,
to
let's
get
see.
there.
We could.
Reworking the
Wait a
numbers
minute.
might help.
Do you know? Which takes more water, pistachios or marijuana? I see the look on your face. Let me explain the
I
reason.
thought you were going to say pistachios or alfalfa. I wasn't
No,
expecting that.
I know the answer there. Pistachios take less than
I
alfalfa.
was going to say marijuana probably takes more, wouldn't it?
I don't know. I have
know.
no knowledge of it. I was just trying to introduce the fact that on the November ballot, we have the legalization of or essentially legalization of marijuana. And I was just thinking,
Are you looking at a business opportunity here?
not for me because I'm not a farmer, I don't know anything about it. But for those people who are farming, that sounds like a optimum change of product. And I don't know what people are allowed to grow or whatever. So it's more humorous than serious.
Sure.
But so if we change all those pistachio fields to marijuana fields, I was just wondering if anybody knew whether the water usage would increase. Of course, I don't have to grow near as much marijuana as I do pistachios to get the same profit ratio. So.
I don't know that we have the climate for that. I'm not.
I don't know either.
Based on, I see raids being conducted in the Sierra. It's usually in mountain communities in Northern California.
Yes,
and
but
such.
there are such things as greenhouses
Well, sure.
where I can control the
Oh,
environment,
absolutely.
make it feel just like the mountains.
Sounds like you've researched this quite well.
No, it's just general knowledge.
So again, back to they're not going to buy the 0% conservation.
What our staff has recommended to the Water Management Committee, which will be recommended to the board on Monday, is that we continue our Ordinance 100, which was enacted last January 13th, which allowed for the 1 day a week watering from November to February. And then we established a target of 20%. We're making 23.9%. And the fact that we enacted Ordinance 100 back in January gave us only 1 month of effect of the ordinance. So I think if we have the 4 months of effect of it, I think the potential to reach 20% is it's achievable. The thing you want to be careful of is the fines don't go away. So if we set a target that we don't accomplish, we're shooting ourselves in the foot, and we're going to potentially being fined.
I got a suggestion for a target then. I mean, at least half that. Say you're going to conserve 10%. I mean, why set yourself an aggressive goal? Set a very minimal goal.
You may think it's aggressive, but I think it's not only aggressive but achievable, and it's something I think that, in my opinion, we should strive for.
I think that you're forgetting about human nature. And when people are asked to respond to a need, they do. When people are asked to respond to a need that doesn't exist, they not only won't, they'll punish you. And they'll say, I'm going to use 5 times that water, just to show them.
Welcome back. Ridgecrest Talk here. Al Huey, Robert Eierman, our special guest, Mr. Don Zdeba from the Water District. We're talking about water, obviously. And before we went to the break, you were saying that it looks like what's going to be proposed to the board is to continue this 20% conservation.
That will be the recommendation to the board, yes.
Well, I did a little bit of checking today, because we were wondering, with some other basins that are in critical overdraft, and at what their reaction has been since the state lifted the water restrictions that they had.
The mandatory water.
Yeah.
They're replacing them.
And talked to Borrego Water District, south of us, down near Mexico. I was surprised to learn that they don't have any restrictions. They allow you to pump up to 7 units a month, and the unit is defined as 748 gallons.
That's 100 cubic feet.
Or yeah, and you're allowed up to 7 of those, and they're tier 1. And if you go above that, then you get into a higher rate that you have to pay for the water. But other than that, they don't have any restrictions. I asked about, well, what if I want to water my lawn 3 times a day? He said, that's fine. But if you go above the 7 units,
you'll pay more.
You'll pay more.
It's a restriction based upon your wallet.
That is one thing that we are currently looking at. We're in the process of finalizing our budgets, our general fund and capital budgets for this year, and projecting our revenues. And that's one thing that's been suggested, is that we look at something more in the lines of that for conservation, as to, it's called budget-based structure, rate structure, which is exactly, I think, what you're describing, Al. So we are looking at that. There's a board workshop yet to be scheduled in July. It's proposed for either the 19th or 20th. And there is a gentleman, and I can't remember the water district he's with, but one of our board directors met him at an aqua conference. And he's the general manager of a water district that was a little reluctant to try budget-based rates. But they actually implemented it, and he's very pleased with the results. So we're going to try to bring him up here for that workshop to talk to our board about that, and then possibly look into something exactly like you're talking about.
Because then, as a customer, and looking at the big picture, it doesn't give the appearance as though the water district is, getting ready to pounce on you if you don't conserve that 20%. Now we're going to fine you or something like that.
How about it doesn't give the impression that the water district, and I'm not saying that you do this, I'm talking about a perception, okay? That people don't have the perception that the water district or the government is trying to exercise power and control. And that's what I was talking about relative to human nature. If you, excuse me, people generally tend to not get even, they tend to get ahead. And so if they feel put upon, then you get that reaction. Not universal, not everybody does it, but you'll get enough people that are unhappy that they'll mess with you just to mess with you, so that they can get ahead. So, and I'll share, there's a lot of organizations within the state who have taken on the attitude, we're going to use as much water as possible, as much as we can get away with, because then when the restrictions come, we'll hardly have to do anything to meet those restrictions. So people are using water here in California as fast as they possibly can so that they'll be in a better position when the restrictions do come. It's called gaming the system, and that's also human nature, and that's also what people do. So I just would caution you to take the side of putting as little restriction on as is reasonable.
Well, to your point, if people are ramping up recently trying to establish, as you say, some sort of usage, but when it goes back to when Sigma was implemented back in 2015, and all bets are off the table from that point on. So in other words, we're not going to look at water use from 2015 on. So if people are doing that, it's not going to have any effect.
Well, but okay, so because it's all going to be based upon something in the past.
Yes.
Well, that might be true, but come 2025 or something time in the future, they're not going to want to go back. People are going to object to going back that far in their water use because their community has grown, their water usage has grown, so that's not a fair demarcation point to use. So in the future, and that's what they're counting on, in 3, 4, 5 years, they'll move that demarcation, and then they'll slide right into their expanded usage.
To address your point about the concern about the 20%, I think what the approach we're looking at right now is that the GSA is in the process of being formed.
Yes.
And we want to give it every opportunity to succeed. So until it's in place and starts developing a plan, I think it's responsible for us to continue doing what we're doing. We've already got the community pretty much on board with the 3-day-a-week watering, the conservation efforts we've got. To pull a rug out from under that right now and say, all bets are up, do whatever you want, I think it's irresponsible and would do damage to the GSA. I think we need to continue what we're doing, let the GSA get formed, get their plan going.
But Borrego has a GSA they're forming also.
Well, you're pointing one example. I can show you other examples.
Yeah.
Clovis is an example where
we don't have a lot of time left. I wanted to get an answer to this quick question.
Sure.
Part of the GSA and requirement from the state is a water budget. Have we established that yet, or are we working on establishing that? And what does it quickly consist of?
It's a work in progress, and part of it is, I may have mentioned last time, the U.S. Geological Survey is there's money through a grant from Prop 1 funding that Kern County received to help fund with the USGS a recharge study, which is one component of the water balance, finding out how much recharge we're actually getting in. And as far as the other variable, the production, we have a fairly good handle on that.
When do you think we might be able to produce, because it's an annual requirement, right?
Mm-hmm. You're talking about the report to the state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that starts, I believe, in 2017.
Well,
Okay.
We're out of time again. We always have a lot of fun talking about water with Don, and so join us again next time. We'll probably
The next
do it
water
again.
board meeting is?
Monday, 6 o'clock.
There you go, folks.
We'll see you next week, folks.